What if I told you that one of the greatest discoveries of the 20th century revealed long-lost insights into the Bible's most mysterious prophecies? The Dead Sea Scrolls, hidden for nearly 2,000 years in the caves of Qumran, hold shocking revelations about the end times, the Messiah, and even the hidden dimensions of angelic and human interactions. These texts don't just echo the familiar words of the Bible, they deepen them, offering layers of meaning that were once out of reach. Welcome to Deep Bible Stories, where today we're uncovering the hidden secrets of the Dead Sea Scrolls. How were these scrolls discovered, and what mysteries do they hold? Join us as we explore these ancient texts, the prophecies they reveal, and the insights they offer into God's plan for humanity. If you're as captivated by these hidden stories as we are, check the description below for links to our other videos on banned books and lost scriptures. And if this video resonates with you, don't forget to like and share to spread these ancient truths. For those who've heard of these ancient texts, you might wonder why they're called the Dead Sea Scrolls. The answer begins in a remote and almost otherworldly landscape. The desert cliffs surrounding the Dead Sea in Israel. It's a place marked by intense heat, vast stretches of arid land, and rocky caves hidden within the cliffs. And it was in these desolate caves, near an ancient settlement called Qumran, that one of the most astonishing archaeological finds in history was made. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd stumbled upon these scrolls entirely by accident. While searching for a stray goat, he tossed a stone into a cave to see if the animal was inside. Instead of the sound of a bleating goat, he heard the unmistakable crack of pottery breaking. Curious, he entered the cave and discovered a collection of clay jars, each one containing rolls of ancient manuscripts, scrolls wrapped in linen and protected from the elements for almost 2,000 years. These scrolls became known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, simply because of where they were discovered, within caves near the Dead Sea, one of the most unusual and isolated places on Earth. But the name holds a kind of poetic irony. The Dead Sea is so named because its waters are too salty to sustain life, yet these scrolls found nearby contain vibrant, living words that speak directly to the heart of spiritual life, prophecy, and the mysteries of God's plan. As word spread, archaeologists and scholars rushed to the site, uncovering more scrolls hidden in nearly a dozen other caves. What they found was nothing short of extraordinary. The scrolls include ancient copies of nearly every book of the Hebrew Bible, alongside texts that had been completely lost to history, some of which aren't found in any other Bible. These writings date as far back as 250 BCE, giving us one of the earliest glimpses into the sacred texts of the Jewish people and the foundational beliefs that would shape Christianity centuries later. Today, the Dead Sea Scrolls are considered one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of all time. These texts not only deepen our understanding of the Bible, but also offer insights into ancient Jewish beliefs, messianic expectations, and spiritual teachings that give context to the world in which Jesus and his disciples lived. They have been meticulously preserved, revealing wisdom that scholars continue to study even now, over 70 years after their discovery. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain an astonishing variety of texts, ranging from ancient copies of familiar biblical books to writings that have no parallel in the Bible. These texts reveal insights that deepen our understanding of Scripture, while also exposing us to ideas and teachings that expand far beyond it. Some of the scrolls echo the Bible almost word for word, while others reveal completely new narratives, beliefs, and expectations that shaped the Jewish community of Qumran, most likely the Essenes, a sect that dedicated itself to a life of purity, isolation, and intense spiritual devotion. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls, scholars found some of the oldest manuscripts of nearly every book in the Hebrew Bible. The book of Isaiah, for instance, was discovered almost intact, giving us an ancient version that mirrors what we read today. This text confirmed the consistency and preservation of Isaiah's prophecies, including those about the coming Messiah, the suffering servant, and the promise of a future kingdom. These biblical scrolls demonstrate a reverence for Scripture that remained unbroken for thousands of years and affirm the integrity of the Hebrew texts. But the discoveries don't stop there. Alongside these traditional biblical books are unique writings that were almost completely unknown until the Dead Sea Scrolls were uncovered. These additional texts open up a world of apocalyptic prophecy, detailed spiritual practices, and esoteric teachings about the end times. One of the most intriguing texts found among the Dead Sea Scrolls is the Book of Jubilees, also known as the Lesser Genesis. This text rewrites large portions of Genesis and Exodus, presenting an expanded view of the early patriarchs from Adam to Abraham, with details not found in the canonical Bible. The Book of Jubilees emphasizes the importance of following a precise solar calendar, a 364-day cycle, divided neatly into 4 seasons of 13 weeks each. Unlike the lunar calendar, which was used in the temple worship of mainstream Judaism, this solar calendar was seen by the Essenes as divinely inspired, a way to stay aligned with God's creation. According to the Book of Jubilees, using a lunar calendar disrupts holy cycles, leading to festivals and Sabbaths falling out of sync with their true spiritual significance. This solar calendar, they believed, was given directly by angels and followed by early patriarchs like Enoch, Noah, and Abraham. The Bible doesn't specify a particular calendar, so the Book of Jubilees introduces an entirely new concept. That time itself, when misaligned, could become an obstacle to true worship. For the Essenes, this calendar was essential for maintaining purity and obedience, something they saw as necessary for preparing for God's future kingdom. Another remarkable text found among the scrolls is the War Scroll, a dramatic apocalyptic account detailing a final battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. This vision of cosmic conflict goes beyond anything depicted in the Bible. While the Bible offers glimpses of an end-time battle, such as the Battle of Armageddon in Revelation, the War Scroll provides minute details on how this final confrontation is to be fought. The War Scroll describes the preparations for this battle down to the smallest details, including the organization of troops, the specific trumpets to be used, and even the precise armor and weapons. The sons of light represent the righteous, led by God and his angels, while the sons of darkness symbolize evil forces, including Rome and other oppressive empires. This text reflects the Essenes' view that they were God's chosen, isolated, and waiting for the day when they would be called upon to fight alongside angels to bring about the final judgment. Unlike the Bible's symbolic portrayal of spiritual warfare, the War Scroll presents a literal, step-by-step manual on how this war would unfold. The Essenes believed they were living in the last days, and the War Scroll served as a call to spiritual and physical readiness, a detailed battle plan to ensure their victory in what they saw as the inevitable clash between good and evil. The Thanksgiving hymns are a collection of deeply personal prayers, confessions, and reflections that resemble the Psalms but go beyond them in their intensity and introspection. These hymns were written by members of the Qumran community as expressions of their devotion, isolation, and purity. They speak of separation from the rest of society and a commitment to live in accordance with God's strict commands, believing themselves to be a remnant chosen by God to uphold righteousness in a world that had fallen into corruption. One particularly powerful hymn speaks of a feeling of being set apart, living in exile even within their own land. The Essenes viewed themselves as spiritual exiles, withdrawn from the corruption they perceived in the temple and mainstream society. The Bible's Book of Psalms also contains reflections of isolation and seeking purity, but the Thanksgiving hymns amplify this theme, as each hymn reveals the writer's sense of living on the edge of eternity, awaiting the judgment day that would vindicate their way of life. These hymns emphasize the Essenes' belief in purity, viewing themselves as spiritually elevated and prepared to endure hardship for the sake of God's ultimate purpose. The hymns reinforce a belief in complete commitment to God's will, with language that suggests a constant awareness of divine judgment and an eternal kingdom for the faithful. One of the longest and most complex texts is the Temple Scroll, a document outlining specific instructions for constructing a temple that, according to the scroll, would surpass even Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. The Temple Scroll offers architectural details, worship practices, and sacrificial rituals that were meant to create a dwelling place for God on earth, a perfect sanctuary that would prepare the community for the coming of the kingdom. Interestingly, while the Bible's book of Leviticus contains detailed instructions for temple practices, the Temple Scroll expands upon these, incorporating additional laws and practices. This text provides an idealistic vision of the temple that the Essenes hoped to see built, a pure sanctuary far removed from what they viewed as the corrupted practices of Jerusalem. They believed that by preparing themselves with exacting rituals, they would be ready to witness or even participate in the establishment of God's kingdom. The Dead Sea Scrolls offer us an invaluable glimpse into the beliefs and hopes of the Qumran community. For them, these texts were not just literature. They were divine instructions for living in alignment with God's will, preparing for the end times, and awaiting a kingdom where purity, justice, and God's presence would reign. The Dead Sea Scrolls hold not only historical and spiritual insights, but also vivid apocalyptic visions that paint a startling picture of the end times. For the Essenes, the ancient Jewish sect likely responsible for preserving these scrolls, the idea of an imminent divine judgment was central to their beliefs. They viewed themselves as living on the brink of history's final chapter, with the scrolls as their guide to understanding and preparing for the end of days. Unlike the Bible's traditional canon, which speaks of the end times in symbols and prophecy, such as in the Book of Daniel and the Book of Revelation, the Dead Sea Scrolls expand these themes into comprehensive, often chilling visions. The scrolls bring to life the Essenes' apocalyptic worldview, describing in detail the coming judgments, battles, and divine interventions they believed would unfold as history reached its climax. At the heart of the Dead Sea Scrolls' apocalyptic visions is a document known as the War Scroll. This text provides a meticulous account of the final battle between the forces of good, called the Sons of Light, and the forces of evil, referred to as the Sons of Darkness. The Sons of Light are represented by the Essene community and the righteous who uphold God's laws, while the Sons of Darkness embody not only sinful humanity, but also spiritual forces of wickedness, including the armies of Belial, a powerful demonic figure synonymous with ultimate evil. The Bible describes spiritual warfare in passages like Ephesians 6:12, which states, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." However, the War Scroll takes this concept further, detailing how this battle will play out physically, describing formations, weapons, and specific strategies for the sons of light. It even includes liturgical practices and battle hymns meant to invoke divine protection, showing that the Essenes viewed this war as not only physical, but deeply spiritual. The War Scroll doesn't leave this conflict as a mere battle. It's an entire war strategy. Trumpets would sound, summoning divine forces, and angels would join the sons of light in the fight. The text states that God himself would intervene, sending down plagues, earthquakes, and celestial signs to weaken the forces of darkness. This scroll serves as both a guide and a prophetic manual, preparing the community for the day they would stand with God against the forces of evil in a final cosmic showdown. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Dead Sea Scrolls eschatology is its concept of not one, but two messiahs. This idea, often referred to as the two messiah prophecy, diverges from the Bible's typical expectation of a single messianic figure. The scrolls describe one Messiah as a priestly figure, known as the Messiah of Aaron, and the other as a kingly warrior-type leader called the Messiah of Israel, or the Davidic Messiah. The Messiah of Aaron was expected to restore the purity of worship, leading the people in holiness and guiding them in spiritual matters. In contrast, the Davidic Messiah was anticipated to be a political and military leader who would liberate Israel from oppression and establish God's kingdom on earth. This dual Messiah concept is not explicitly mentioned in the Bible, although some scholars find hints of it in Zechariah 4, where two anointed ones stand beside the Lord, and in Psalm 110, which mentions a priestly and kingly role. For the Essenes, these two messiahs represented God's dual approach to redeeming Israel through spiritual purification and political liberation. Together, they would bring about the establishment of a holy kingdom where the righteous would dwell in peace. This idea reshapes the traditional understanding of the Messiah, giving us a glimpse into how the Essenes interpreted prophecies differently than mainstream Judaism, seeing themselves as custodians awaiting both a spiritual and a militaristic savior. Among the more mystifying apocalyptic texts is the Scroll of Melchizedek, which presents Melchizedek, a mysterious priest-king mentioned briefly in Genesis 14, as a central heavenly figure in the end times. In this scroll, Melchizedek is not just a priest, but a divine agent of judgment, returning in the last days to proclaim liberty and bring justice to the righteous while condemning the wicked. The Bible introduces Melchizedek as a king of Salem and a priest of God Most High, Genesis 14:18, a figure who blesses Abraham but remains largely unexplained. Psalm 110 later mentions a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek, and the New Testament book of Hebrews draws parallels between Melchizedek and Christ, describing Melchizedek as a foreshadowing of Jesus' eternal priesthood. However, the scroll of Melchizedek takes this figure even further, portraying him as an eschatological judge and high priest who will lead the faithful in the final judgment. In this scroll, Melchizedek appears as a redeemer, coming to defeat Belial and deliver justice. The Essenes believed that Melchizedek would return on the Day of Atonement to forgive the sins of the righteous and usher them into the final kingdom. For the Essenes, Melchizedek's role was deeply symbolic, a sign that God's eternal justice and mercy would manifest through a heavenly high priest at the end of days, a figure who would stand against the forces of darkness and redeem those who remained faithful. Another fascinating apocalyptic vision found in the Dead Sea Scrolls is that of the New Jerusalem. This text describes an enormous utopian city that would descend from heaven and serve as the eternal home for the righteous. This vision aligns with Revelation 21's description of the New Jerusalem, where John sees the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. However, the Dead Sea Scrolls offer additional details about this city. In their vision, the New Jerusalem is designed with 12 gates, one for each tribe of Israel, and is measured with mathematical precision. This city is described not only as a physical place, but also as a divine reality where the righteous will dwell with God eternally, free from sin, pain, and suffering. Each gate is guarded by an angel, and the city itself is illuminated by God's presence, symbolizing an eternal light that dispels all darkness. The Essenes viewed the New Jerusalem as more than a promise. It was their inheritance. They believed that by upholding strict purity and obedience to God, they would one day walk through the gates of this holy city. This vision was a source of hope and endurance, motivating them to remain faithful amidst a world that they felt had lost its way. The Dead Sea Scrolls also delve into the unseen spiritual realm, offering elaborate descriptions of angelic beings who guard and guide the faithful, as well as demons who seek to corrupt and deceive. In the scrolls, angels are not only messengers, but warriors who will fight alongside the righteous in the final battle. The Essenes believed that angels constantly observed and protected them, recording the deeds of each individual and ready to intervene on behalf of God's people. The scrolls describe specific angelic hierarchies, each with roles in the final judgment and the ultimate restoration of God's kingdom. Conversely, the scrolls also warn against demonic entities, evil forces that the Essenes believe were actively involved in leading people astray. This elaborate view of angels and demons adds depth to the Bible's mentions of spiritual warfare and provides a more vivid picture of the unseen battles that the Essenes believed were already at play in their lives. The Dead Sea Scrolls bring the end times to life in a way that amplifies the Bible's apocalyptic messages. These texts reveal a community waiting with intense anticipation for divine judgment, driven by prophecies, spiritual preparation, and hope in God's coming kingdom. For the Essenes, the Dead Sea Scrolls weren't just prophetic writings or spiritual guides, they were a blueprint for how to live in preparation for the end times. Every aspect of their lives was shaped by the apocalyptic beliefs detailed in these texts. They saw themselves as the sons of light, the chosen few entrusted with preserving God's laws, protecting sacred knowledge, and preparing for the cosmic battle that would ultimately cleanse the world. This heightened awareness of a coming judgment drove them to extreme dedication, setting them apart from mainstream society and influencing their every action. Unlike other Jewish groups at the time, such as the Pharisees and Sadducees, the Essenes withdrew from society, forming a community isolated in the wilderness near the Dead Sea. This separation wasn't just physical, it was deeply spiritual. They believed mainstream society had become corrupt, even within the temple, and that only by living in purity could they avoid the influence of evil and remain ready for God's intervention. They viewed themselves as guardians of true worship, dedicated to a life of simplicity, prayer, and adherence to strict ritual laws. Central to the Essenes' preparation for the end times was a commitment to purity. The scrolls reveal that this community adhered to rigorous purity laws, far stricter than those outlined in the Bible. Daily rituals, such as communal prayers, regular fasting, and ritual baths, were not only acts of devotion, but acts of preparation, keeping their minds and bodies ready for the coming of the kingdom. Every meal, every gathering, and every prayer was performed with a sense of divine purpose, as though each act contributed to their readiness for the ultimate battle between light and darkness. The Bible discusses purity laws, particularly in the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, but the Essenes took these to a new level. For example, the scrolls reveal that they would ritually cleanse themselves before communal meals, believing that even their food must be consumed in a state of holiness. They refrained from personal wealth, lived communally, and saw their adherence to these rules as a form of spiritual armor. The Essenes believed that living with this purity was crucial to being counted among the righteous when God's judgment day arrived. The Essenes also practiced celibacy, which set them apart from other Jewish groups who placed a high value on family and lineage. For the Essenes, abstaining from marriage was a way to maintain spiritual focus and purity. They saw themselves as a community consecrated entirely to God, with no distractions from earthly relationships or personal desires. Their abstinence from marriage and family life reflected their commitment to a higher calling and their belief that they were living on the edge of eternity. Community life among the Essenes was structured with strict regulations on behavior, shared ownership of goods, and communal responsibilities. Everything was done collectively, emphasizing unity, humility, and a deep sense of responsibility for one another. The Essenes believed that only by living in harmony could they embody the sons of light. This communal lifestyle was inspired by their apocalyptic worldview, where selflessness and unity were not just ideals, but essential practices for preparing to face the ultimate spiritual challenges. Another pillar of Essene life was the intense study of sacred texts, including many that are found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They believed that understanding the hidden mysteries within these texts gave them insights into God's will, the end times, and the spiritual realm. The Essenes saw themselves as keepers of divine knowledge, privy to secrets that mainstream society could not comprehend. This study was rigorous and ongoing. The Essenes believed that by immersing themselves in these texts, they would remain spiritually vigilant and gain the wisdom needed to discern the signs of the times. The scrolls reveal that the Essenes saw their study as part of a larger spiritual battle. To them, understanding the apocalyptic visions, the role of angels and demons, and the mysteries of creation meant aligning their minds with God's plan, allowing them to remain resilient in a world that had drifted from divine truth. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of the Essenes' life was their unwavering hope. In their isolation, in their rejection of society, and in their rigorous daily practices, they lived with a vision of the coming kingdom that sustained them. The Dead Sea Scrolls' descriptions of the New Jerusalem and the Messianic age gave the Essenes a purpose that transcended their immediate reality. They believed that their sacrifices, their isolation, and their purity would ultimately be rewarded when God's kingdom arrived. For the Essenes, this was not merely a theological idea. It was the heartbeat of their daily lives. The scrolls described a future where the righteous would inherit a world cleansed of sin, a world filled with peace and ruled by divine justice. Every hardship they endured, every temptation they resisted, was seen as part of their preparation to stand with the faithful at the end of days. Their hope was unshakable because it was grounded in a vision of God's promise, a future so real to them that they lived as though it could come at any moment. The Essenes' dedication challenges modern believers in ways that may feel surprisingly relevant. In a world filled with distractions, they offer a reminder of the importance of living with purpose, purity, and a sense of the eternal. Their lives ask us to consider our own priorities. How can we, too, live with a sense of preparation and devotion? What would it mean for us to cultivate spiritual resilience, to dedicate our lives to a higher purpose, and to focus on God's kingdom with such intensity? The Dead Sea Scrolls and the lifestyle of the Essenes reveal a community that chose to live on the edge of eternity, taking to heart the call to be vigilant and faithful. Their example prompts us to reflect on our own spiritual journey, to consider how we might prepare ourselves in a world where the line between light and darkness is often blurred. The Essenes remind us that faith is not merely a belief, but a way of life, one that calls us to be ready for the day when God's promises will be fulfilled. The Dead Sea Scrolls offer us more than historical and theological insights. They present a powerful message that resonates across centuries. As we've seen, the scrolls capture a community deeply committed to living in alignment with God's will, a group who saw themselves as the guardians of truth, preparing for a divine reckoning. Their anticipation of the end times, their dedication to purity, and their fierce sense of purpose challenge us to reflect on our own spiritual journey. So, what do the scrolls reveal for believers today, and how can these ancient texts inspire us to live with greater intention and focus? The Essenes believed they were living on the edge of history, just steps away from witnessing God's intervention in human affairs. Their commitment to spiritual and physical readiness raises a question for modern believers. How prepared are we to face our own spiritual battles? The Dead Sea Scrolls reveal the Essenes' unwavering discipline, their constant awareness of divine presence, and their pursuit of a life that honored God's law in every detail. In a world filled with distractions, the scrolls remind us of the importance of living with a sense of eternity. Like the Essenes, we too face the temptation to become complacent, caught up in the everyday demands of life. The Dead Sea Scrolls urge us to stay vigilant, to prioritize our spiritual growth, and to live in a way that reflects our faith in God's promises. For the Essenes, this vigilance was essential, not just to avoid temptation, but to ensure they were ready to inherit God's kingdom. The concept of a cosmic battle between light and darkness, as detailed in the War Scroll, underscores the reality of spiritual warfare. For the Essenes, this battle was not abstract. It was a living truth that informed their every action. They saw themselves as sons of light, charged with upholding righteousness in a world darkened by sin. This sense of spiritual identity reminds us that we, too, are part of a larger battle, one that calls for resilience, prayer, and an unwavering commitment to God. The Bible speaks of spiritual warfare in Ephesians 6:12, reminding us that our struggles are not merely against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of evil. The Dead Sea Scrolls deepen this concept by showing us how the Essenes actively prepared for this battle, both physically and spiritually. They remind us that faith is not passive. It calls for action, discipline, and a readiness to stand against the forces that threaten to pull us away from God's truth. The Dead Sea Scrolls' vision of the New Jerusalem offers a message of hope that transcends time. The Essenes believed that this holy city would descend from heaven, a perfect dwelling place for the righteous, free from suffering and sin. This vision aligns with the promise in Revelation 21, where God creates a new heaven and a new earth, wiping away every tear and making all things new. For modern believers, this hope of the New Jerusalem invites us to look beyond the struggles of today, to anchor our faith in the promise of a future kingdom where God's justice and peace will reign. It's a reminder that every act of faith, every moment of perseverance, brings us closer to a reality where we will dwell in God's presence. The Essenes viewed their commitment as part of their journey toward this eternal city, inspiring us to remain steadfast and to live with a hope that transcends the temporary challenges we face. The Dead Sea Scrolls also challenge us to re-evaluate what it means to live a life of faithfulness. The Essenes embodied a level of devotion that many of us rarely encounter. Their dedication to purity, communal living, and spiritual preparation reveals a depth of faith that extends beyond individual belief to an entire way of life. They didn't just believe in God's promises, they structured their lives around them. For us, this can be a powerful reminder to bring our faith into every part of our lives, not just in our worship, but in our daily choices, relationships, and work. The Dead Sea Scrolls inspire us to see faith as an active journey, one that calls us to constant growth, integrity, and commitment. Whether through prayer, study, or acts of kindness, we're reminded to live in a way that reflects God's presence in every corner of our lives. Lastly, the Dead Sea Scrolls reveal a profound dedication to studying and understanding God's Word. The Essenes approached Scripture with an intensity that went beyond reading. They sought to unlock hidden meanings, to uncover prophecies, and to align themselves with divine wisdom. They believed that studying these texts allowed them to see beyond the surface, to grasp the mysteries that God intended for the faithful. In today's world, where information is at our fingertips, we sometimes lose the depth of engagement that the Essenes brought to their spiritual practices. The Dead Sea Scrolls invite us to dive deeper, to seek understanding and meaning in our own scriptures, and to let those insights transform us. This commitment to study reminds us that there is always more to discover, more wisdom to gain, and more ways to grow closer to God through His Word. The Dead Sea Scrolls, with their apocalyptic visions, profound teachings, and disciplined lifestyle, offer us a living legacy, a call to live with purpose, hope, and an unwavering commitment to God's promises. Their words have traveled through centuries, emerging from the dust of Qumran to challenge and inspire us today. The Essenes remind us that faith is not just a belief, but a journey, one that calls for vigilance, devotion, and a readiness to embrace the eternal truths God has revealed.